Alright, in this tutorial we're going to map the rest of these panels on the garage. We're going to try to make quick work of it because these are all the same, and once we get a template established we should be able to fly through it pretty quick. So, the first thing we want to do in GeoPix is check out our generator settings. And by the way, if you don't have these devices over here, I recommend following the tutorial from the last in this series, and you'll end up here. But anyways, in generator 1, you'll notice over here in the attributes, it says X pitch and Y pitch. It is a value of 3.333. This is the default in GeoPix. You can change it to anything you want by sliding it. You could double click and enter a value, like 10 or whatever. But we want this to be a very specific size, and the size of our panels in the real world have a pitch of 1.667, which I have here in Notepad. So I'm going to copy this number, and I'm going to paste it in X pitch and Y pitch, since our pitch is the same across both axes. And once we've got that, our panel is the right size. So next thing we need to do is build a frame that goes around this, a geometric frame that will allow us to snap this fixture to other fixtures like it. And then of course the other added benefit of that is we have some system that lets us maintain equal spacing between panels. That's very important. So what we need to do is hop over here to the Create tab, which if you can't see it due to the video overlays, it's the very bottom left of the window, the sideways tabs. Just click on the Create tab, and then over here under Objects, just click on Primitive. Once you've clicked that, just right click in your viewport to set it to origin. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and what I'm going to do next is change the mode from cube over here to plane. And then once I've done that, we can just drag the scale down a little bit and dial this in. You can eyeball it if you want, and you can probably get it pretty close, but I'm actually going to do this correctly mathematically, and what I need to do is figure out what the scale needs to be to accommodate the correct border size around the pixels. So when you have a default scale of 1, something to talk about real quick, that means your primitive is 1 meter cubed. So in the case of this plane, we have 1 meter wide by 1 meter tall. So we need to figure out what this scale needs to be in terms of meters. Well, let's hop over to calculator for a second and do some math. We know that the pixel pitch is this number, so we're going to need that. And we also know that we have 10 LEDs on each axis, which means we have 9 spaces across. So that means a pitch of 1.6667 times 9. Then if we also add the border offset, that means we have half of a pitch on the left and half of a pitch on the right, which gives us perfect tileability, which if we add that all together, that's 10 spaces total at 1.6667. So let's multiply this by 10. And then to get this into meters, we just divide by 100. And we have a new number, and we can copy this and paste this into our scale X and our scale Y for our geometry. Once we've done that, we pretty much have one more step left to do before we can start duplicating, and that is to parent our fixture to our geometry. So go ahead and select your fixture, and then shift select your primitive. And once you've done that, you can go to Tools and click Parent. You'll notice that fixture 1 has now become parented to primitive 1. And let's go ahead and rename this to frame 1, something a little bit more descriptive. So we have 3 objects, and they're all parented here together, and that's great. So I think what we can do now is turn our LEDs back on. And I'm going to go over here into the settings and just set this back to live data. And as you can see, we have some content moving across our physical panel. However, this looks quite wrong in terms of direction and all that, so let's go ahead and rotate our panel so we can see about finding the right rotation. So, rotating the frame, the geometry, not the fixture below it. Let's go ahead and rotate on Z. And let's just keep rotating until we get this looking correct. It looks like -45 is the orientation we want, so I'm going to go and type that in. And that's looking good. Let's hop over to I/O and let's change our ramp to from vertical to horizontal. Let's just double check that things look correct, and it does. So we'll just leave it on horizontal for now. And so our template's good, and now we can simply start duplicating this object vertically. You'll notice that if you look at the fixture settings, our offsets are all set to 1 across the board. When we duplicate this, and I'm going to select the object above, frame 1, and just go ahead and click duplicate over here on the left. You can also hit Control D. You can then go to move mode under the object tools and just left click in your viewport and then just drag your mouse up, and you can place this anywhere for now. We're going to snap it together later. Once you've duplicated that, you can go to fixture 2, the new object, and you'll notice that channels has been offset to 300, and you can also see here in parentheses that a fixture is 300 channels wide, 100 pixels times 3 channels, red, green, blue. And so in the background, GeoPix automatically tries to intelligently offset your offsets so that you never have to worry about conflicting addresses. Although that's going to sometimes fail when you need a space or when you purposely want to do something different. But for the most part, if you're using pixels with ArtNet, you don't want overlapping and you want things as close as possible together, and it works out pretty well. And so for me, I have things configured to take advantage of that hardware-wise, so this is going to move pretty quickly. Anyways, so as you can see over there in the garage wall, we have 2 panels doing their thing. So let's go ahead and duplicate this last one a couple more times. I'm going to move it up again and then move it up again. And by the way, I'm using Control D and then left clicking to initiate the move. And so we've got 4 panels. These look like they're doing the right thing. Let's just go ahead and put them in the right positions. So frame 2, let's go ahead and snap that to frame 1. And by the way, snapping is very easy. All you have to do is hold S on the keyboard, and then you drag an orange dot to any other orange dot. So if I grab frame 3 up here and I hold S, I can click on this orange dot and drag it right down there. And then I can do the same thing with frame 4. And we have ourselves a stack of panels here, which matches what we have in the real world. So I'm going to select all 4 frames, and I'm going to go to the Create tab, and here's Group. So find Group, and then click on that. You can also hit Control G, and what that does is it takes a group, a newly created group, and it parents all your objects to that group. So make sure you right-click in the viewport to reset to origin, and then let's go and rename this to, I don't know, G1. Alright, so one last thing I want to do here is scoot these frames down on Y. So what I'm going to do is go back to Tools, go to Move Mode, and then I'm going to modify my constraints, which you might not be able to see, to only be on the Y-axis. And so you can do this by hitting W on the keyboard, which goes into Move Mode, and then you can hit Y on the keyboard, which will activate only the Y constraint. This way you can just move things up and down and not left and right, etc. So all I'm doing is getting this fixture to be more or less on top of the group, so that the group is always marking the center of the topmost panel. This is just an organizational thing. You can do this if you want, you can avoid it, but it helps in the long run for top aligning these fixtures, since that's how they're going to be suspended from various trusses and walls and stuff like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and change the mapping back to vertical. Let's just double check that things are indeed mapped correctly. They are. So I'm going to move G1 off to the left. And I'm not even going to worry too much about its specific location yet, because what I want to do next is duplicate this group and go ahead and create all of our other panels on the wall. And then once we've got them in existence, we can actually go through and we can move the panels around and rearrange them to their proper arrangements. So I'm going to duplicate G1, and now we have a second cluster right here. And let's go ahead and take care of this one first. Let's go and center it, and then let's expand the group, and let's just go through here and let's find what we need to do. All right, so frame 5 is the first one, and that's the bottommost panel. Sometimes the numbers and names get scrambled. Just find the next one in the series, and that's obviously the right one, because on the wall the second panel is the one in the middle there. So Let's find the one that comes next. Looks like the leftmost panel, or the top left panel, is this second to last one. So we'll move this over here a little bit, and then we'll just get that last one over there, and now we can snap these together. And the reason I just visually move them off to the side was so I can identify which one's which, but sometimes based on how you built it, and you can just kind of shortcut that process and move them straight into position. So up to you on that. So I'm going to move this up and do the exact same thing I did on the other one, which is align the topmost panels with the center of the group. And again, let's just flip-flop our ramp and make sure things are mapped correctly. They are. And that's great. So we can move this off to the side. And let's go ahead and duplicate everything we need for our center cluster. That's the next one. So let's go ahead and hit Control D again. We grab group 2, turn it into group 3. And we can, let's just go ahead and center this on the grid for now, actually. And once we've done that, take a look at our wall there. We see that we have 3 panels lighting up, not 4. And the reason we don't have that 4th panel lighting up is because I actually have it disconnected. One of the reasons, well, the reason why is because one of the sides is broken. So in order to keep it consistent on both sides, visually, I've just unplugged both. So we only have 3 panels for this specific cluster, but we actually want to address 4 anyways for the time being. And the reason being, the auto offsetter that happens in the background is looking and scanning the scene for the highest address offset. And so it's actually useful to leave this here until we get all of our panels in place, and then we can go back and delete the dummy panels, the ones that don't actually show up, aren't physically there. But it helps to have them in place for the sake of easy address offsetting. So, okay. Let's open this group and let's see here. So the very first panel on that 1, 2, 3, third output is the leftmost panel. So we want to grab panel number 1, which is this first one down here, and let's just move it somewhere into position. And then once we've done that, let's go ahead and expand these. So I'm toggling this one and I'm not seeing it go on and off, which means this is the dummy panel. So let's go ahead and grab frame 10. Let's just move it all the way down here. Then we have, see, frame 12 should be, so the next panel in the series on the wall is that one that's on right now. So that would be frame 12, good. We actually want to snap this over here, and then frame 11, which we can now turn back on, we want to snap this right here. So we got this little V shape. Now, this is actually mapped correctly in terms of position, but you'll notice that the animation is going the wrong way, and there seems to be like a staggered offset, and that's because this particular cluster, this whole centerpiece, is actually, the panels are all rotated by 180 degrees, which is incorrect in accordance with the other panels, but that's fine. We can just rotate them in software by grabbing these fixtures, or the frames would actually be a fine choice as well. And for RZ, just click on the label and take -45 and just add plus 180 and hit enter, and that's going to automatically calculate the new rotations for you. And there you have it. You've got panels rotated in the right direction now. Okay. So we've got G3. This is looking correct, although we have this floater down here. We're going to get rid of it later. But for now, let's just go ahead and grab this group and let's duplicate it one more time. And you'll notice that we have only one extra panel lighting up. So this center wire, the cable that's going right down the middle of the garage, it only has one panel attached. However, it's still expecting, the Pixelite is still assuming there is 400 pixels behind that, so it's not starting the next offset until 400 pixels later. So again, we can use this dummy panel situation to kind of help us create our our fixtures, and then we can go back through and delete them later. And so again, we just want that first panel, which is down here. So let's go ahead and snap this into place. And then we can just take 14, 15, 16, and we can just move them down here. We'll delete these later. And then we can grab G3, which is fine, and duplicate this again. And let's move this over. And this is almost correct, but since this is coming from the other side, and the way I built it, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So we actually want to flip, I think 19 and 20. So 19 is here, and then we can snap this to here. 18 we can snap to 19, and then 20 we can snap to that one. And it looks like we're close. Let's change our mapping and let's go vertical for a moment. And so it looks like we have some things that are a little bit strange. Let's go ahead and change our mapping to circular. Okay, this is a little more helpful. It looks like, for one thing, we have the center panel off. So Fixture 16, this one right here. We actually have the wrong panel up here. We should actually have this one. I'm not sure how I missed that, but let's go ahead and fix that now. So frame 13 is actually a dummy panel, and frame 16 is in fact the correct panel. So we just snap this right here, and yep, that looks like the whole center cluster is fine now. All right. And so this whole area right here is a bit of a mess. G, 3, 4, and 5 is all technically one fixture. We're going to clean this up here in a bit. So I'm just going to group this one more time with Control G, and we'll forget about that. All right. The last thing you need to do is just duplicate our first two clusters, which actually have the same shape and layout as the first two. So let's go ahead and duplicate this one. Actually, I'm sorry, let's delete that. Let's duplicate G2, which is the spade over here. Control D. Let's just place it over here somewhere. That looks good. And then we can grab G1, because it's now the rightmost thing we have left to duplicate, and we'll just hit Control D again, and we'll just push this all the way over here. So our mapping looks correct, although our groups are definitely not placed precisely, so we're going to fix that next. But before we do any of that, let's clean up this middle piece. We can first of all delete a bunch of stuff. We don't need these dummy panels anymore. So let's go ahead and go to select mode, and actually we can use marquee, which is a little bit easier to select things with marquee. So I'm going to hit M on the keyboard. You can also just choose it from here and just drag a box around these, and you'll see them get selected, and I just hit delete on the keyboard. And those are now gone. And so now we're left with a few groups. We have like a way too many groups here. We don't need this many since everything here is basically going to stay together in one piece. So what we can do is select all of these fixtures. And we can do this a couple ways, but I'm just going to shift select group 1, which is our new parent for these, and then hit P on the keyboard. And we've now removed them from those groups and parented to this group. So now that we have these empty groups, we can just delete them. And group 1 it's all zeroed out, which is good. So let's grab these frames. And let's go ahead and move these a little bit. Let's see here. Okay. Alright, so we got this V, and then we've got this V, and then we have, let's see, which panel is this? Frame 16. So we can zero this out, and then let's just scoot this down right there. That's looking good, and then we can just basically snap everything back together like so. I believe this one goes here. That goes there, and this goes there. Alright, does our mapping still look correct? Yes, this looks fine. Alright, so we can actually call this G3. Looks like we lost some panels. I must have deleted them by accident. That's no problem. Let's go ahead and zero out G4. Let's call this G4. And let's place this at 100 units to the right. Let's grab G2. Let's place this at negative 100 units. And then we'll grab G1. And negative 200. Let's put it a little bit closer. Negative 150. That's too close. Negative 175. I think that is perfect. Alright, so we can grab G1 with it still selected and hit Control D. And let's just go ahead and place it over here, 175, and there we have it. That is the full setup mapped, and we could do one more thing here, a little bit of house cleaning, and just kind of condense this further. So I'm going to select all of these groups, and I'm going to group it one more time. I know that sounds excessive, but this is completely optional. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I like to simplify scenes as much as possible once I'm done editing them. So we'll call this diamonds. Let's call this G diamonds. Alright, so now if we collapse this and hold shift, we can auto expand everything, and as you can see, we've got a lot of stuff in here. These generators, they're actually going to interfere with things we do in later videos, but even if we stopped right here and didn't do anything else, it's just a lot of extra stuff we don't need. These generators have served their purpose, and unless we want the flexibility of going back in later and changing the dimensionality of these panels, it's not necessary to keep these in here. So I'm going to go through here and just select all of the generators. Once we've done that, we can just delete them from the scene. And so that's nice. We actually don't need, another thing we don't need is the geometry. The geometry that's here only served the purpose for snapping, and we don't really need it in the scene. So I'm actually going to go through here and delete those as well, but this is a little trickier because the fixtures are actually parented to the geometry. So if we delete the geometry, we delete the fixture too. We don't want that. So what we need to do is just go through here first and select the fixtures for every group. In this case, this diamond cluster right here. Once we have them selected, shift select G1 and hit P on the keyboard. And we've now successfully moved those and parented them to the group, and now the frames we can harmlessly delete. And so we'll do this several more times for each of the groups. If this seems a little complicated or strange, you can just you can ignore this step. This is something that, if you're familiar with working in 3D and 3D applications, this kind of parenting shuffle is probably quite familiar to you. Otherwise, it might seem a bit strange. Just know that it's not necessary. It just kind of helps clean things up, and that helps your experience in the viewport stay as fast as possible as time goes on. And the last one here, okay, so this is a much more elegant scene. There's not much going on here. Everything's very straightforward. So if I wanted to, I can even go through and name these fixtures. Bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, properly name them. But I'm not going to do that. I think this is fine. So anyways, we can collapse these groups again. And if we want, since this this device really only has to do with this fixture group, we can actually parent it to the G diamonds. And we have a complete system here. Now we can do a couple things at this point. I'm going to move these down a little bit. And this is why I anchored all of the panels the way I did against the group, because now I can just specify a number and we can move this whole group up and down. If we want, we can grab certain clusters and we can move them up and down, and if we want to go back, we just reset TY to 0 and everything is where it was. So I'm going to put these in -50 for no particular reason. I just like seeing the groups a little bit more clearly. And the device, where are you? The device was up somewhere else, so I'll move this device maybe right here, kind of in between, so -25. And again, this is optional, you don't have to do this, but this is something I like to do so that things are a little bit more visually clear to me about what's what. And also just makes it easier to select stuff in the viewport instead of through the outliner. But at this point, you might just save your project again, so we're going to go and do that, and I'll save this to the tutorials folder. But you can also export this, so if you select the group, the topmost group, or just the objects you want to export, you can export this to a file, a prefab file, which is different than a scene, or a project rather, and this would be called diamonds mapped. And what you can do with this is next time you have a file or a project and you want to import your diamonds as a starting point, you can just bring this right in, and everything that you have set up will be brought into another project for you. So if you have several components, different parts of a show, you can save each one out, and then when the time is right, import those into whatever project you're building next. And that's a way of saving yourself work in the future. Alright, so that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching. In the next one, we will start setting up these LEDs and doing some interesting things with content and projectors, and just playing around with what you can do and exploring that a lot. And then we'll just go on from there to the DMX stuff, which is also quite a lot of fun. Alright, thanks.